The screaming started at 4:47 in the morning. Private First Class David Chen jerked awake in his foxhole on the northern perimeter of Hill 142, his hands instinctively reaching for his M1 Garand before his brain had fully processed what was happening. The scream came from Second Platoon's position, maybe 60 yards to his left. It was a kind of sound that bypassed all rational thought and went straight to the primal part of your brain that remembers what it's like to be prey. Then the scream cut off, just stopped mid-breath, replaced by a wet gurgling sound that was somehow worse than the screaming had been. Chun pressed his face into mud at the bottom of his foxhole and waited for dawn. He didn't sleep. Nobody slept anymore. Not after 3 weeks of this. When the sun finally crawled over the ridge at 6:15, First Sergeant Kowalski made his rounds, counting bodies. Second Platoon was down another man. That made 7 in the past 4 days. 7 Marines who had woken up one morning and never made it to the next. None of them killed by artillery. None of them killed in a firefight. They had been selected, one, by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't hear, and couldn't fight back against. The Japanese snipers operating in the hills west of their position weren't just killing Marines. They were psychologically dismantling an entire company. Men were refusing to leave their foxholes. They were pissing in their helmets rather than risk the 15-yard walk to the designated latrine trench. The company mail clerk had been shot through the throat while signing for a package. The battalion chaplain had been hit in the head while administering last rites to a wounded radio man. These weren't combat deaths. These were executions, delivered with surgical precision from positions that seemed to shift like smoke. Captain Brennan, the company commander, was losing his mind. He had called in artillery strikes on suspected sniper positions, wasting hundreds of rounds on empty hillsides. He had sent out patrols that returned with nothing except more casualties. He had even ordered suppressive fire into the tree lanes during mealtimes, turning breakfast into a deafening carnival of wasted ammunition that accomplished absolutely nothing except announcing to the Japanese exactly where the Marines were positioned. The experts had solutions. They always did. Battalion sent up a specialist with a sound detection unit that was supposed to triangulate gunfire. It was useless in the echo chamber of the hills. Division sent up a spotter plane that circled overhead for 2 hours, accomplishing nothing except drawing anti-aircraft fire that wounded 3 Marines when shrapnel rained down on their positions. Regimental headquarters suggested using more machine guns for suppression, as if the problem was a lack of firepower rather than a complete inability to find the targets. At 0800 hours on March 12, 1945, Captain Brennan assembled his platoon leaders in the command bunker. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week, because he hadn't. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform was wrinkled, and his hand shook slightly as he lit his 3rd cigarette of the meeting. The conversation was circular and desperate. More patrols, more artillery, more suppressive fire. The same solutions that had failed for 3 weeks. And then, from the back of the bunker, a voice interrupted. "Sir, I can kill them." Every head in the bunker turned toward Corporal Michael Santos. He was 24 years old, lean and quiet, with the kind of face that disappeared in the crowd. He had been attached to the company for 6 weeks, transferred from a rear echelon supply unit after he got caught reading during a general's inspection. He was considered soft, bookish, and utterly unremarkable. His fellow Marines called him the librarian, because he carried a worn copy of Hemingway in his pack and spoke incomplete sentences. Captain Brennan stared at him. "Corporal Santos, unless you have a solution that doesn't involve magic or prayer, I suggest you shut your mouth." Santos didn't flinch. "I have a rifle, sir, a civilian rifle, and I can shoot." The platoon leaders exchanged glances. One of them, Lieutenant Marsh, let out a bitter laugh. "A civilian rifle? What are you going to do?" "Santos, hunt deer." "I'm going to hunt them," Santos said simply. Brennan stubbed out his cigarette. "What kind of rifle are we talking about?" "Remington 700, Santos replied. "Chambered in 30-06. I brought it from home. It has a red field scope, 4-power magnification. I'm a competitive shooter. Sir, I was a California State long-range champion in 1942. I can put 5 rounds into a 3-inch circle at 400 yards. The bunker went silent. Then Lieutenant Marsh broke the tension with a snort. You brought a hunting rifle to a war? What? Did you think we were going to have a turkey shoot between battles? I brought it because I knew we might need precision, Santos said, his voice level. The M1 is a great weapon for infantry combat, but it's not built for this. The snipers are sitting in the hills at 300, 400 yards out. They're taking single shots from concealed positions. You can't suppress them with volume of fire, because you don't know where they are. You need to hunt them the same way they're hunting us. Brennan leaned forward. Why didn't you mention this rifle before? Because I tried, sir. I reported it when I arrived. The armorer laughed at me and told me to leave my toys in the rear. He said if I want to contribute, I should carry a real weapon. Marsh shook his head. The armorer was right. A bolt-action rifle? In 1945? That's World War I technology. Santos. We moved past that for a reason. The Garand fires 8-round semi-automatic. Your little deer rifle fires, 5 rounds? And you have to work the bolt between each shot? In a real firefight, you'd be dead before you chambered your second round. I'm not planning on getting into a firefight, Santos said. I'm planning on shooting them before they know I exist. Captain Brennan stood up and walked to the entrance of the bunker. He looked out at the hills, at the position where 7 of his Marines had died. He turned back to Santos. Do you really think you can do this? Yes, sir. If I authorize this and you fail, you're going to make me look like an idiot. If I fail, sir, it won't matter what you look like. Your men are dying. Brennan studied him for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. You have 24 hours to prove it. One day. If you can kill even one of those snipers, I'll give you whatever support you need. If you can't, you go back to carrying the Garand, and you never mention this rifle again. Understood, sir. And Santos, Brennan added, his voice hardening, if you get yourself killed out there because you thought you were Davy Crockett, I'm going to write a letter to your mother explaining that you died because you were a stubborn idiot. Santos nodded. I'll try not be a stubborn idiot, sir. That night, Santos sat at his foxhole and unpacked the Remington 700 from the canvas case he had kept buried under his spare uniforms. The rifle was beautiful, a masterpiece of American craftsmanship. The stock was walnut, polished to a deep shine that seemed out of place in the mud and filth of the Pacific. The barrel was blued steel, 24 inches long, cold and precise. The bolt was smooth as silk, engineered at tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. And mounted on top was a Redfield scope, a tube of glass and steel that could make a target at 400 yards look close enough to touch. He had bought this rifle in 1940 with money saved from 2 summers working in his father's machine shop. He had taken to ranges in Southern California, competing against ex-military marksmen and professional hunters. He had learned to read the wind by watching the grass. He had learned to control his breathing until his heartbeat was a slow, steady metronome. He had learned to squeeze the trigger with the same pressure every time, 3.2 pounds of force, no more, no less, until the shot broke like a glass rod snapping. And then Pearl Harbor happened. Santos had enlisted, certain that his skills would be valuable. Instead, he had been shuffled through boot camp, assigned to a supply depot, and told to count ammunition crates. When it asked about sniper training, a gunnery sergeant had laughed in his face and told him the Marines didn't need rifle-range cowboys. They needed men who could carry gear, dig holes, and follow orders. Precision was a peacetime luxury. So Santos had kept his mouth shut and carried the rifle with him, waiting for the moment when the experts would run out of solutions and desperation would give him a chance. That moment was now. At 0530 hours on March 13th, before the sun had cracked the horizon, Santos moved out. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He didn't bring a radio. He took the Remington, 40 rounds of ammunition, 2 canteens, a poncho, and a K-bar knife. He wore no rank insignia. He smeared mud on his face and hands until he looked like part of the landscape, and then he disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. He moved west, away from the company perimeter, into the no-man's land between the Marine positions and the Japanese-held ridges. The terrain was broken and vicious, a maze of gullies, volcanic rock, and thorny vegetation that grabbed at his uniform like skeletal hands. He moved slowly, testing each footfall before committing his weight, avoiding dry branches and loose stones. Speed didn't matter. Sound was death. It took him 90 minutes to cover 400 yards. When the sun finally rose at 6:47, Santos was in position on a rocky outcrop that overlooked a narrow valley between two ridges. He had chosen this spot the previous day during a patrol, memorizing the terrain features and sight lines. From here, he could see 3 likely sniper hides, a cluster of boulders on the opposite ridge, a fallen tree with good overhead cover, and a cave entrance partially obscured by brush. He settled in behind the Remington, resting the forestock on a flat rock. He pulled the poncho over his head and body, breaking up his outline. He became part of the hillside. And then he waited. Waiting is the hardest part of sniping. It's harder than the shot, harder than the stalk, harder than the escape. It requires a kind of patience that most people don't possess. You can't fidget. You can't scratch an itch. You can't shift position because your leg is cramping. You have to become a stone, absolutely still, while your mind stays sharp and alert, scanning the environment for the smallest anomaly that doesn't belong. Santos had learned this patience on the ranges in California, waiting for targets to appear at unknown distances. But this was different. On the range, the worst consequence of impatience was a missed shot and a lost trophy. Here, impatience meant death. He watched the valley through the red field scope, moving his eyes slowly across the terrain, grid by grid. The magnification transformed the landscape, bringing distant details into sharp focus. He could see individual leaves moving in the breeze. He could see a lizard sunning itself on a rock. He could see the texture of the volcanic soil. What he couldn't see were the Japanese snipers. They were good, better than good. They had turned themselves into part of the environment. At 0847 hours, Santos saw something that didn't fit. In the cluster of boulders on the opposite ridge, approximately 380 yards away, there was a shadow that was slightly darker than the surrounding shadows. It was shaped wrong, too vertical, too consistent. Natural shadows shift and change as the sun moves. This shadow stayed the same. Santos focused the scope on the shadow and watched. For 11 minutes, nothing happened. And then, so subtle he almost missed it, the shadow moved. Just a fraction, a shift in angle that caught the light differently for a split second. There, a man, wedged between 2 boulders, wearing a camouflage smock that matched the volcanic rock perfectly. He was facing southeast, toward the marine positions, his rifle resting on the boulder in front of him. He was waiting for a target of opportunity, waiting for a careless marine to expose himself. Santos adjusted his scope, compensating for the 380-yard distance. He calculated the wind, watching the grass on the valley floor. Light breeze, maybe 5 miles per hour, left to right. He adjusted the scope 2 clicks to the right. He settled his cheek against the stock. He controlled his breathing, letting it slow until each breath was a long, measured cycle. In, hold, out, hold. His finger found the trigger. He began to apply pressure, slowly, steadily. 3.2 pounds of force spread over 3 seconds. The Remington kicked into his shoulder with a sharp, authoritative punch. The report cracked across the valley, like a thunderclap. Through the scope, Santos saw the Japanese sniper jerk backward. The man's rifle clattered onto the rocks. His body slumped sideways and disappeared between the boulders. Santos didn't celebrate. He worked the bolt, the polished steel sliding smoothly, ejecting the spent brass and chambering a fresh round. The mechanical action took less than 2 seconds. He kept the scope trained on the boulders, watching for movement. Japanese snipers operated in teams. If there was a shooter, there was a spotter, and the spotter had just watched his partner die. Santos scanned the area around the boulders, searching for the second man. Nothing. He widened his search, checking the fallen tree, the cave entrance, the entire ridgeline. Still nothing. And then he realized his mistake. He had been looking at static positions, but the spotter wasn't in a hide. He was moving. Santos caught the movement in his peripheral vision, 60 yards south of the boulders. A figure was running, sprinting along the ridgeline, tried to escape before the American sniper could acquire him. He was fast, covering ground with the desperate speed of a man who knows he's being hunted. Santos tracked him through the scope. The range was 410 yards and increasing. The target was moving at approximately 12 miles per hour. Santos had practiced this shot 100 times on the California ranges, leading running targets at extended distances. It was one of the hardest shots in precision shooting. He led the target by 3 body lengths. He exhaled halfway and held his breath. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle roared. Through the scope, Santos saw the running figure stumble, pitch forward, and collapse onto the rocky ground. He didn't get up. 2 shots, 2 kills. Santos extracted the spent casing and chambered his 3rd round. He stayed in position, watching the ridgeline for another 40 minutes. No more movement. The valley had gone silent except for the wind and the distant sound of surf. At 1,034 hours, Santos began his exfiltration. He backed away from his position, keeping low, using the terrain for cover. He moved east, away from the valley, circling back toward friendly lines through a different route than he'd used to approach. He moved slowly, stopping frequently to listen and observe. By 1320 hours, he was back inside the Marine perimeter. Captain Brennan was waiting for him at the command post. "Well, 2 confirmed kills, sir," Santos said. "Japanese snipers operating from a position on the western ridge. They won't be a problem anymore." Brennan stared at him. "2? You killed 2 of them?" "Yes, sir. They were working as a team. Shooter and spotter." Lieutenant Marsh, who was standing nearby, shook his head. "How do you know they're dead? Did you go check the bodies?" "I know where I hit them, sir," Santos replied calmly. "And I know what a 30-06 round does to a human body at that range. They're dead." For the next 24 hours, the Marines waited to see if Santos was right. The test was simple. Did the sniper attacks continue? On March 14th, the company went about its business. Marines walked to the latrine. They heated rations. They moved supplies. They did all the things that had gotten men killed for the past 3 weeks. Nobody was shot. On March 15th, Captain Brennan called Santos back to the command bunker. "I need you to do it again." Santos nodded. "How many are left?" "Intelligence thinks there are at least 9 more snipers operating in this sector. They've been identified by their tactics and firing positions. We need them all gone." "I'll need support, sir. A spotter, someone to watch my back and help with target acquisition." Brennan assigned a Marine named Thompson, a quiet kid from Montana who had grown up hunting elk in the mountains. Thompson didn't have Santos's competitive credentials, but he knew how to move quietly, how to read terrain, and how to keep his mouth shut. It was enough. For the next 7 days, Santos and Thompson became ghosts. They would leave the perimeter before dawn, disappear into broken terrain, and return after dark. They didn't operate from the same position twice. They never took the same route. They became unpredictable, invisible, untraceable. On March 16th, Santos killed his 3rd sniper, a shot at 340 yards that took a Japanese soldier who had been hiding in a spider hole overlooking a water source. On March 17th, he killed his 4th and 5th, a team that had been operating from a cave system on the northern ridge. The first shot at 422 yards dropped the shooter. The spotter tried to retreat deeper into the cave. Santos waited for 2 hours until a man emerged, thinking the danger had passed. Santos put a round through his chest at 390 yards. On March 18th, the Japanese adapted. They stopped operating during daylight. They went nocturnal, taking positions in the pre-dawn darkness and extracting before the sun came up. But Santos adapted too. He and Thompson began their hunts at 0400, moving into position while it was still dark, waiting for the snipers to settle into their hides. On March 19th, Santos killed his 6th sniper at 0612 hours, just as the sun broke the horizon. The Japanese soldier had been careless, silhouetted against the dawn sky for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was all Santos needed. The Japanese commander realized he was losing the sniper war. On March 20th, he tried a desperate gambit. He sent out 3 snipers simultaneously, positioning them in a loose triangle covering overlapping fields of fire. The idea was simple. If the American sniper killed one of them, the other 2 would triangulate on his muzzle flash and kill him. It was a good plan. It almost worked. Santos spotted the first sniper at 0738 hours, positioned a tree line at 365 yards. He killed him with a single shot. Immediately, Santos and Thompson scrambled from their position, moving 40 yards north before the Japanese could respond. They heard the crack of rifle fire behind them, bullets tearing through the brush where they had been seconds earlier. Thompson spotted the second sniper, the one who had just fired. He was in a rocky outcrop 290 yards away, his position exposed by the muzzle flash. Santos put a round through his head. The third sniper, realizing his team was being dismantled, tried to retreat. Thompson tracked him with binoculars, calling out his position as he moved. West Ridge, moving north, ranged for 140 yards, passing the dead tree. Now. Santos led the target, compensated for the upper angle, and fired. The Japanese soldier fell mid-stride. 3 snipers dead in 8 minutes. It was a masterclass in tactical shooting. By March 22nd, Santos had killed 10 Japanese snipers in 9 days. The number was staggering. The psychological impact on both sides was immense. The Marines were walking upright again. The Japanese were abandoning their positions. But Santos knew there was at least 1 sniper left. Intelligence had identified 11 based on the pattern of attacks. 10 were confirmed dead. The 11th was still out there, the best of them, the one who had survived while his comrades died. On March 23rd, Santos and Thompson went hunting for the ghost. They set up on a ridge overlooking the primary approach route the Japanese had been using. It was the most dangerous position Santos had taken yet, fully exposed to the west, with limited cover and no easy escape route. But it offered a commanding view of the valley. They waited from 0500 to 1130 hours. Nothing. At 1147, Thompson whispered, "Movement, southwest, 520 yards in the rocks." Santos swung the scope toward the position. He saw it immediately. A figure moving between boulders, low and fast, using cover expertly. The range was extreme, beyond what Santos had practiced consistently. At 520 yards, wind drift became significant. Bullet drop was over 4 feet. A miss at this distance was easy. A hit was extraordinary. "He's heading for that cave in trance," Thompson said. "If he gets inside, we lose him." Santos calculated the shot. The wind was gusting, maybe 8 miles per hour, shifting direction. The target was moving erratically, using unpredictable patterns. The angle was uphill, requiring compensation. It was by any measure a nearly impossible shot. Santos adjusted his scope. 6 clicks up for elevation, 4 clicks right for wind. He tracked the moving figure, waiting for a pause, a moment of stillness. The Japanese sniper reached the cave entrance. He stopped for 2 seconds to glance back, checking to see if he was being pursued. 2 seconds. Santos fired. The round took 0.64 seconds to travel 520 yards. In that time, the bullet dropped 4.2 feet, drifted 14 inches to the right, and lost 22% of its velocity. It struck the Japanese sniper in the upper chest, just below the collarbone, the impact spinning him sideways. He collapsed against the cave entrance and didn't move again. Through the scope, Santos watched for movement. Nothing. The ghost was dead. "That was the best shot I've ever seen," Thompson said quietly. Santos worked the bolt and extracted the spent casing. He pocketed it, the 11th casing from 11 kills. "Let's go home." They returned to the company perimeter at 1,420 hours. Captain Brennan was waiting. Santos gave his report in the same flat monotone he had used for every previous kill. 11 snipers. 11 confirmed kills. 0 friendly casualties. Brennan sat down heavily on a crate. "You did it. You actually did it." "Yes, sir. You know what this means, right? Regiment is going to want you to train other Marines. They're going to want to replicate what you did." Santos nodded. "I can do that, sir, but they need the right equipment. The M1 is a great weapon, But it's not a sniper rifle. We need precision instruments, bolt-action rifles with quality optics. And we need men who can shoot, really shoot, not just qualify at the range. I'll make sure Regiment understands, Brennan said. He looked at the Remington 700, muddy and scarred from 9 days in the field. And nobody's going to call that rifle a toy again. The story of Corporal Michael Santos didn't end on that hillside. He went on to train 23 Marine snipers, forming the foundation of the Corps' modern sniper program. He survived the war and returned to California, where he opened a gunsmithing shop and taught precision shooting to a generation of competition shooters and hunters. The Remington 700 that had been dismissed as a toy became the template for the military's future sniper rifles. Santos died in 1998 at the age of 77. The rifle was donated to Marine Corps Museum in Quantico, Virginia, where it sits in a glass case with a small placard that reads, Remington 700, used by Corporal Michael Santos, 11 confirmed kills, March 1945. Most visitors walk past it without a second glance. It looks ordinary, unremarkable, like something you'd find in a sporting goods store. But it is not ordinary. It is the weapon that proved precision beats volume. It is the rifle that killed 11 ghosts. It is the tool of the man who refused to accept that his skills were worthless just because the expert said so. We tell this story because history forgets the individuals who changed the paradigm. We remember the big battles, the famous generals, the grand strategies. We forget the corporal who went into the hills alone with a hunting rifle and rewrote the rules of engagement. If this story resonated with you, if you felt the tension of that 520-yard shot and the weight of hunting men who were hunting you back, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that these stories matter, that we care about the forgotten, the overlooked, and the underestimated.